You think you can use those same tired bullying tactics to overpower me? Brad Cooper hissed through clenched teeth, his knuckles paling as he squeezed his fist. You really think that silence and avoidance will save you here at Lincoln? Samantha Carter slowly lifted her head. Her calm gaze swept over the crowd, holding its breath. There was no hint of fear in her eyes, only an icy, unwavering resolve that seemed to freeze the air around her. I'm not hiding from anything, Brad, Samantha said, her voice clear and gentle, yet pulsing with quiet strength. I just hope you won't force me to show everyone who I really am. And just who are you? Brad sneered, a mocking curl of his lips, completely unaware that in just a few minutes everything at Lincoln High would flip upside down, and he'd be the one begging forgiveness from the person he'd underestimated most. That morning's sky was a dull slate gray, the clouds drizzling a light rain over the empty streets of Maplewood, Ohio. An old car rolled slowly into the small town, as if hesitating at the strange stillness that hung in the air. In the passenger seat, Samantha Carter rested her head against the window, her large, dark eyes reflecting both anxiety and the weariness of a long journey. At 16, Samantha was all too familiar with starting over. This was the fourth time in 3 years that she and her mother had packed up and moved. Their constant relocations weren't by choice, but by necessity. Her mother, Rebecca Carter, a devoted nurse, chased new job opportunities to build a better life for them both. Yet no matter how many towns they called home, Samantha understood one painful truth. However hard she tried, curious and often judgmental stares followed her everywhere like a shadow she couldn't escape. We're almost there, Sammy, her mother said softly, trying to break the tension that seemed to thicken the air in the car. Samantha offered a small, uncertain smile as she glanced out the window. The neat rows of small, weathered houses with their white picket fences passed by like scenes in a slow, somber film. This place felt worlds away from bustling Detroit, where she had been born and raised. Detroit had noise and chaos, but at least there she never felt quite so alone in her brown skin. The car finally came to a stop in front of a pale blue house at the end of a quiet street. Rebecca stepped out first, surveying the scene before turning to her daughter with an encouraging smile. Samantha, I really think this time will be different. Maplewood seems peaceful. Maybe this is our fresh start. Yeah, Mom, Samantha replied softly, her voice trailing off as doubt flickered across her features. After unloading a few essentials, Samantha stepped onto the front porch. A cold breeze swept past, making her shiver. From down the street, she noticed neighbors peeking over their fences, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Even such quick glances were enough to remind Samantha of the weight she always carried, that unspoken wall of prejudice separating her from the world around her. Suddenly, an older woman from next door emerged, her gaze scrutinizing Rebecca and Samantha without even hiding her discomfort. The woman's raised eyebrows spoke volumes. Her distrust was plain on her face the moment she saw the newcomer's dark skin. Samantha sighed quietly, bracing herself. No matter how peaceful this town looked, the same old racial biases formed an invisible barrier she would have to break through. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her eyes squeezed shut as she tried to push away the exhaustion gripping her mind. Would this time truly be different, or was she simply stepping into another cycle of old wounds and familiar pain? Once again, Samantha steeled herself for her first day at Lincoln High, knowing full well she would face weariness and rejection from new classmates and would have to fight for respect in a place unprepared for someone like her. Samantha never imagined that in front of her lay not just an adjustment period, but a fierce battle for her dignity, one that would shatter preconceptions, demand recognition of her worth, and prove to everyone willing to learn that her strength ran far deeper than her skin color. The first days in Maplewood passed in cautious silence. Samantha tried to slip quietly into the town's slow rhythm, repeating an old lesson to herself. Smile just enough, speak in a whisper, and above all, never draw attention. Every step she took down Lincoln High's hallways was measured, as though a single off-note glance might set off a cascade of stares, or worse, vicious whispers. No one here would guess that behind her slender frame, neat braids, and eyes that always looked down, Samantha had once been the name that sent opponents trembling at Detroit's junior mixed martial arts tournaments. For 4 years, she'd trained through sweat and blood, conquering peak after peak, facing prejudice not only for her age and gender, but for her skin, too. In the ring, taunts of "that colored girl" had knocked her to the mat. But they also forged an iron will and a resilient strength no peer could match. But in Maplewood, the ring, her trophies, her medals, all were locked away in memory's drawer. Not out of shame, but because her mother, Rebecca, begged her to hide every trace. "Samantha, things are different here," her mother urged one evening, worry in her eyes as she peered past the curtains at curious neighbors. "They don't understand what they don't know. If people learn you were an MMA champion, they'll only judge you more harshly. I just want you to be safe, free from needless trouble." Samantha said nothing, but inside, a struggle burned. She knew her mother was right. Detroit had taught her never to count on strangers' kindness. There, Sam the Champ was both a shield against teasing and a reason for reluctant respect. No one dared pick a fight. But here, a single rumor that a black girl had beaten dozens of male opponents would make Samantha the rumor mill's favorite topic, or worse, a target for those eager to assert power. Lincoln High, so peaceful on the surface, hid its own underground currents. White student cliques clustered together, tossing off jokes about Detroit cops or those inner-city kids when Samantha walked by. On the sidelines, white parents waited for carpools, shooting condescending glances or whispering, "Isn't she the girl who transferred from one of those rough neighborhoods?" Amid it all, Brad Cooper embodied every Maplewood prejudice. Tall, blonde, usually wearing the football team's jacket with its bold logo, Brad was mayor of Lincoln High in the eyes of teachers and town leaders alike. His father owned the region's largest auto chain, his mother headed the PTA, and Brad had never known a second of disapproval or had to fight for anything he wanted. He needed only a look or a smirk to turn someone's ordinary day into a personal hell. From day one, Brad noticed Samantha, not because she stood out, but because her quiet difference in skin color irked him. In his mind, Lincoln High was his. Anyone not like us, especially a new black student, was fair game to assert his dominance. At first, the jabs were subtle, but soon they grew bolder. Brad's friends exchanged sideways glances and half smiles whenever Samantha passed by. They spoke loudly of those newcomers, colored neighborhoods, and recycled city stereotypes. Though they never addressed her directly, every word and stare felt like a needle piercing her pride. Samantha grew used to the isolation. In class, turning in homework even at lunch, she sat alone in the canteen's farthest corner. A handful of other black students eyed her wearily, as if befriending her could drag them into unnecessary drama. Yet what troubled Samantha most wasn't loneliness, but the growing fire of anger and the longing to reclaim herself. She missed the freedom of landing precise kicks, the roar of the crowd in the arena, the respect earned through skill rather than judged by skin. But with her mother's wishes and the town's prejudice pressing down, Samantha stayed silent, though inside embers glowed. She had no idea that this hidden strength, this bottled-up pride, would soon ignite a chain of events that would forever change her and all of Maplewood. The day Samantha feared most finally arrived, her first day at Lincoln High. A thin morning mist hovered over the campus, and inside Samantha's chest, a storm of nerves raged. She told herself to walk quickly, stay humble, and draw no attention, hoping everyone would see her as just another new student. But in Maplewood, just another student was a luxury Samantha had never known. The moment she stepped through the front gate, she felt the scrutinizing stares. Whispers drifted from a cluster of students, gathered on the steps, punctuated by giggles and pointed barbs. "Hey, another Detroit transplant. I wonder if they even know what manners are over there." Samantha kept her head bowed and hurried down the main hallway, trying to blend in with the crowd. But her dark skin and quiet presence made her stand out against Maplewood's sea of confident, fair-skinned faces. She felt every cold glance, tracking her every movement. At lunch, she chose a small table by the window, far from the noisy groups. She was unwrapping her lunchbox when 3 large shadows blocked her table. Brad Cooper stood in the middle, blonde hair cropped close, gray eyes ice cold, wearing the football team's jacket. To his left was Kyle Morris, short and sly with a mocking glint in his eye. To his right, Jake Sullivan loomed tall with a taunting smirk. "Hey, Detroit," Brad said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Can't find a school in the city, so you had to come back to our hometown." Kyle jumped in. "Or maybe Detroit's too dangerous now, right? It's peaceful here, but don't get too comfortable." "Newbie." Jake leaned in close to Samantha, grinning. "Looks like this kid's even more scared than the freshman." Samantha said nothing, knowing any reaction, even a glance, would only make things worse. But her silence seemed to irritate Brad most. To him, power wasn't just about threats. It was about controlling someone's emotions, especially a black student fresh from the city. Brad slowly sat down across from her, elbows on the table, eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "At this school, everyone follows the rules," he said, each word deliberate. "Newcomers like you, especially from a place as messy as Detroit, need to know your place. There's no room here for weird." Kyle and Jake sat on either side, boxing her in. Kyle pretended to grab Samantha's lunchbox and shook it. "Whoa, that homemade lunch looks interesting. Is that how they eat in Detroit?" Nearby students watched, but no one stepped in. Their eyes flicked away, as if this had nothing to do with them. Or worse, they didn't want to cross Brad Cooper, whose dad could make problems disappear with one call. Brad lowered his voice, leaning in. "You know who I am, right? Brad Cooper. Around here, I call the shots, got it? You can do whatever you want in Detroit, but here, if you don't behave, you won't last the week." The tension was suffocating. Samantha clenched her fists under the table, her nails cutting into her palms. She remembered her mother's advice. Sometimes taking it is better than starting a fight. But the humiliation, the rage, and the helplessness of being targeted for her skin burned in her throat. yet she remained silent. Not out of weakness, but because she knew one wrong move could wreck her entire future here. After a few more minutes of cruel jabs about Detroit criminals and black girls who need to stay in their lane, Brad smacked the table so hard that Samantha's lunchbox tumbled to the floor, spilling its contents everywhere. "Clean this up, Detroit," he sneered, turning away as Kyle and Jake's laughter echoed behind him. As the cafeteria slowly returned to its usual din, Samantha knelt to pick up scattered rice, her hand shaking, not from fear, but from the fierce hurt inside. From that moment, she knew. In Maplewood, her battle wouldn't just be loneliness. It would be standing up to polite faces, hiding poisonous prejudice, with Brad Cooper at the very center of it all. The lunch period ended with Samantha's humiliation still clinging to every step she took as she quietly left the cafeteria, her empty lunchbox tossed deep into the trash. But that darkness was only just beginning to settle over her days at Lincoln High. For Brad Cooper, one public shaming was merely the opening act in the welcome ceremony he had devised for the black girl daring enough to set foot in his territory. The very next morning, as Samantha stepped through the school gates, Brad and his two loyal henchmen were already waiting by the stairwell, their eyes bright with anticipation of fresh entertainment. The moment they spotted her tentative approach, a cruel grin spread across Brad's face. "Hey, Carter," Brad called out, his voice raised so everyone nearby would hear. "Over here. I've got something I need to tell you." Samantha hesitated for a moment, then tried to keep walking, but Jake blocked her path, shoulder to shoulder like an impenetrable wall. A circle of students began to gather, drawn by curiosity and eager to watch how the next victim would be handled. Brad stepped in close, eyes as cold as steel. "Back in Detroit, you probably got everything you wanted, huh? This isn't Detroit. Understand?" His words were measured and cutting, each one designed to slice at Samantha's pride. Kyle jumped in with a low growl. "Around here, you want to stay safe? You follow the rules, especially black girls like you." Heat rose to Samantha's cheeks. Her breath came fast. Though insulted, she kept her composure, clutching her backpack straps as if they were the last vestige of security. Brad wasted no time flaunting his power in front of the crowd. "Starting today, you'll give me $5 every single day. Consider it protection money. If you don't want your car keyed overnight, your desk slashed with ink, or your textbooks to disappear, you'll do exactly what I say." He offered her a mocking smile and tapped her shoulder as if he were granting a lifeline. Jake stood next to him, laughter bubbling up. "Back in Detroit, you're used to this, right? Don't even think about escaping Brad Cooper's rules here in Maplewood, kid." Brad didn't stop there. He turned up the humiliation for maximum effect. Speaking loud enough for all the nearby students to hear, he declared, "City folk always love to cause trouble, especially you black kids. But this is Maplewood. Got it? Here we decide who's safe and who's not." Scoffs and jeers rippled through the onlookers, mixed with impressed oohs. The spectacle was the afternoon's best show. A few students shook their heads and turned away, but no one dared intervene. In that moment, Samantha realized, in Maplewood, justice did not favor the powerless, especially not a lone black girl new to town without friend or allies, though every instinct screamed at her to fight back. Samantha swallowed her anger. She saw her mother's worried expression flash across her mind and heard her gentle plea. "Don't give them any reason to hurt you." Drawing in a steadying breath, Samantha met Brad's gaze and responded with surprising calm. "I don't want any trouble. I just want to go to school in peace." Brad let out a mocking laugh, his eyes flicking over her face with cold satisfaction. "Then you'd better do what I say, Carter. People around here don't welcome strangers, especially ones who think they can get away with Detroit rules." Those last words cut her off from the rest of this small world, as if with a blade. Samantha turned and walked away, her shoulders tight with tension, her shame weighing her down like a leaden burden. Yet despite the hurt, she clung to her promise to her mother, to hide her true strength and endure, hoping only that time would pass quickly enough for the storm to die down. What no one could see was that behind her fragile appearance, Samantha was holding back an ocean of fury and wounded pride. But to Brad, this day was just the warm-up, a firm assertion of his power, and he was certain that Samantha Carter would never dare to defy the cruel rules he and his friends had laid down for anyone not from around here. The nightmare Samantha had long feared finally arrived just days after Brad's warning. On Friday at lunch, the Lincoln High cafeteria buzzed with chatter and the clatter of trays, just another midday scene at a Midwestern school. As usual, Samantha slipped in and sat alone by the window, far from the trendy white cliques, hoping her lunch would pass unnoticed. But peace never lasted for someone who didn't belong here. Before she'd even opened the meal her mom packed, the thump-thump of sneakers echoed across the floor. The cafeteria, freeze. Isbessa so amobis. Awade all a day of Ashwada is Diridata, Wise turned to Brad Cooper's crew. Brad led the way, a smug grin in place, with Kyle, Jake, and a few football players snickering behind him. "Hey, Detroit!" Brad called out loudly, making sure everyone heard. "I heard! You still haven't paid up our protection fee!" Whispers rippled through the room. Curiosity flared in countless gazes. Samantha lifted her head, her face composed, though her lips pressed white. She forced calm into her voice. "I've already told you. I don't want any trouble." Brad smirked, glanced at Kyle, then stepped up and flipped his tray, sending hot soup, gravy, and steaming food cascading down Samantha's lap. "How's that for Detroit hospitality? Or is your skin so dark I couldn't see how filthy you were?" He laughed cruelly, each word dripping with cruelty. It happened so fast that many watched in stunned silence. A second later, the cafeteria burst into laughter. Some students even pulled out phones to record, thrilled by the spectacle. "Look, it's Detroit girl stew," a girl jeered, pointing at Samantha's ruined clothes. Samantha froze, tears stinging her eyes, but she bit her lip to keep from crying out. Her skin burned, the fabric was soaked through, her body trembled with pain, shame, and anger all at once. The insults and mocking laughter stabbed at her like knives. Brad leaned in close and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "Here, we don't let trash like you get above yourself. Remember my rules. If you don't, this is only the beginning." Jake cackled while Kyle played innocent. "Oh, careful. Don't want the ghetto kids to sue you for racism, right?" A few black students present looked down, fear etched on their faces. Others turned away or joined the laughter. No one dared defend Samantha. In Maplewood, standing up to Brad Cooper meant social exile for you and your family. Hands shaking, Samantha gathered the remains of her lunch. The physical pain was nothing compared to the utter humiliation of being publicly shamed for her skin and background. She didn't look at anyone. She simply left, leaving wet footprints and mocking laughter behind her. She dashed to the girls' bathroom and tried to rinse the mess from her clothes, but the stain only sank deeper into fabric and skin. In the mirror, her braids were plastered with soup, her eyes were red and puffy. The fierce strength she'd worn as armor now cracked under shame. Rage roared inside her like an uncontrollable fire, but she held it back, hearing her mother's voice. Stay patient. Stay silent. Wait until it's over. Yet today, Samantha knew her patience was at its limit. In the depths of her despair, she realized, if this happened one more time, she might not keep her promise to her mom, and she wouldn't hide who she really was in Maplewood any longer. The aftermath of that humiliating lunch haunted Samantha all day. Even though she'd scrubbed the soup stain from her shirt, dried her hair, and tried to freshen up before class, she couldn't erase the looks of disgust, the burst of laughter, or the racist taunts that had filled the cafeteria. Being stripped of her dignity in front of hundreds of strangers left her choking back tears, feeling utterly alone and furious. After school, she walked home in silence down Maplewood's empty streets, her mind a whirlwind of memories. Images of Detroit surfaced, where she'd once stood in the ring under bright lights, cheered as a true warrior, where those who had mocked her finally bowed in respect before her strength and pride. Here, though, she endured shame simply for the color of her skin and where she came from. That evening, as the kitchen lights flickered on, her mother bustled about preparing dinner, wearing a tired but reassuring smile whenever she caught Samantha's eye. Samantha helped wash vegetables, in silence, her hands trembling, with all the emotions she refused to show. Every caring question, "How was school today, honey?" only made her feel guiltier for hiding the pain of the day. Once dinner was done and her mother had gone upstairs, Samantha quietly pulled out her phone and dialed her old coach, Marcus Bennett. His warm yet firm voice came through the line, as familiar as the gym bells during their toughest training sessions. "Hey, Sammy! Long time no hear. How are you holding up?" That simple question broke her. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted everything: the insults, the blatant public humiliation, the crushing feeling of being trampled, just for being different. Coach Marcus listened in silence, then spoke thoughtfully. "Samantha, I know you're strong, but Maplewood isn't Detroit. Here, one wrong move can get you and your mom in real trouble. Guys like Brad don't just have power at school. They have influence in town, too. But you can't keep taking it forever. The more you tolerate, the weaker they'll see you. When you fight back, do it smartly. No witnesses who can twist your words. No serious injuries. And never give them an excuse to go after you or your mother." He paused, his voice steely. "Remember, you have a right to defend yourself. But don't let anger cloud your judgment. Pick your moment and your method so they understand you are not an easy target." His words cut through the fog of gloom in Samantha's heart. She thought of her mother who'd sacrificed so much and knew that if things escalated, it would hurt them both. Yet by continuing to endure, she'd let all the other students of color live in fear, never free to be themselves. That night, Samantha lay awake by her window, watching the distant street lights and hearing a patrol car's engine rumble somewhere nearby. For the first time in years, she didn't want to hide or bow her head any longer. She made a decision. It was time to stand up. Not for revenge, but to end the fear and show that she and anyone like her deserved respect. The next morning, Samantha walked into school with heavy steps, but a steady gaze. From across the hall, she saw Brad Cooper, tall, smug, eyes full of scorn. But she didn't flinch. She was ready for one last conversation, a battle not just between two people, but between her pride and a world of prejudice, determined to drag her under. She didn't know if she would win or lose, but she was sure of one thing. This time, she would no longer be the silent victim. And deep inside, Brad Cooper remained oblivious that the day he'd spent proving his power over the school would soon become the day he paid the price for every cruel, arrogant act he'd inflicted on the weakest among them. That morning, Samantha walked into school just like any other day, quiet and low-key. But only she knew the resolve stirring inside her wasn't fear anymore. It was the calm before a fight she was destined to face. During P.E., while the thud of football cleats echoed across the field, Samantha slipped away to the locker room corridor, exactly where Brad Cooper and his crew usually hung out after practice. As dusk fell and the last students poured out of the stadium, Brad strode ahead of his pack, his captain's jacket draped over one shoulder, eyes flicking arrogantly around. Kyle and Jake trailed him, throwing taunting glances Samantha's way, unaware that her restraint had reached its breaking point. Samantha stepped forward and blocked Brad's path. Her gaze was steady, no longer cast down, as calm as a still lake at night. She spoke in a low, clear voice that carried across the lot, making Brad's friends and a few passers-by stop in their tracks. "I need to talk to you, Brad." The entire lot fell silent. Brad arched an eyebrow in mock surprise, then laughed, equal parts contempt and amusement at the new toy, daring to challenge him. He couldn't believe a quiet, dark-skinned girl who'd always kept her head down would have the nerve to confront his power. "What do you want, Detroit?" he sneered. "Gonna cry for everyone again?" Samantha didn't flinch. "I challenge you one-on-one behind the stadium parking lot after practice. If you win, I'll pay your protection fee for a month. But if I win, you leave me alone and apologize to the whole school." Her words stunned the onlookers. Kyle laughed first and clapped Brad on the shoulder. "All right, buddy. Let's see what Detroit can do." Brad glanced around at the watching eyes, especially the other black students who usually slipped by unnoticed. His ego wouldn't let him back down. "You got it," he said. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the crowd dispersed, news of the challenge spread like wildfire. The deserted lot behind the stadium held only a few parked teacher cars. Samantha stood ready, her jaw set, fists clenched, breathing slow and controlled. She wasn't scared or hyped. She was focused, replaying Coach Marcus's drills in her mind. Each strike, each pivot, each disciplined hour in Detroit's gym. Martial arts weren't just revenge, they were her way to prove her worth. Brad appeared, swaggering in with his sleeves rolled up to show off his biceps, a smirk still in place. "This is my playground, Detroit. You ready?" he taunted. "Yeah, I'm ready," Samantha replied, her eyes ice cold. Without warning, Brad lunged first, swinging a heavy punch like an axe at Samantha. But she'd read his move a heartbeat earlier, a quick sidestep, and his fist sliced through empty air. In that same instant, Samantha fired back with a lightning-fast left hook to Brad's stomach. He doubled over, his breath caught in his chest. Brad roared and tried to charge back in, but Samantha dropped back into range, every move smooth and precise like a dance. He threw a wild hook, and she simply slipped aside, then swept his knee with a low kick that sent him wobbling. The lot fell silent. Except for Brad's ragged breaths and the stunned gasps of Kyle, Jake, and a few spectators hiding behind cars to watch the show. Samantha stepped forward without haste, her gaze sweeping over Brad's shocked face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. He launched himself at her again, yelling, "You're just garbage from Detroit!" In a flash, Samantha caught his wrist, jerked him off balance, and locked his arm so he hit the ground hard enough to pin him without causing serious harm. It was the control her years of training demanded. Brad lay there, gasping, his eyes wide with terror and disbelief. He had never been defeated, never made to kneel, especially not by a small black girl he'd mocked so viciously. Samantha released him and looked down with a steely calm. Her voice rang out across the empty lot. "This is the last time you touch me, Brad Cooper. I don't need your respect, but I demand you leave me alone. Otherwise, next time it'll be worse." In that moment, no one doubted Samantha Carter's power. No one again dared mock her for her skin, her background, or her silence. That fight, though it lasted less than a minute, shattered the power structure at Lincoln High, buried Brad Cooper's arrogance, and woke everyone up to the fact that injustice can indeed be overturned. The next morning, the halls of Lincoln High were electric. Word of the fight between Brad Cooper and Samantha Carter spread faster than any rumor. Small clusters of students whispered in disbelief. "Is it true? Brad actually got taken down by that new black girl." Curiosity quickly morphed into awe, and even a bit of respect. Even the teachers couldn't ignore the unusual buzz. Some watched Samantha with cautious eyes, others with a quiet pride, as the once timid girl strode into class with her back straight and her gaze forward. But all eyes really gravitated toward Brad Cooper. He showed up with a faint bruise on his cheek, his usual swagger gone, his head down to avoid anyone's stare. Where he once ruled Lincoln High like royalty, he now looked like any ordinary kid, only much, much humbled. At lunch, the cafeteria was packed and tense. Samantha sat at her usual corner table, but this time she felt every pair of eyes on her, curious, doubtful, admiring, even resentful. A few white students murmured to one another, "Let's see how long she can keep that status." Some of the girls shook their heads, whispering, "It was just luck. Brad will get his honor back." Then something unexpected happened. Brad Cooper marched over to Samantha's table deliberately, determinedly. The room fell utterly silent. Phones clicked up, ready to record what might be the most extraordinary moment in school history. Brad stopped in front of her, pale-faced, his lips pressed tight as if swallowing all that shame. For several seconds, no one dared breathe. Then, in a quiet but clear voice, he said, "Samantha, I'm sorry for everything I did. I was wrong." A ripple of stunned chatter swept the room. Brad's voice trembled as he continued. "I treated you horribly just because you're different. Because of your skin and where you're from. That was wrong. I won't bother you anymore." Samantha met his apology with steady eyes, neither triumphant nor vindictive. She knew this was the moment countless victims of Brad had dreamed of, including herself. Yet she recognized that a public apology wasn't a humiliation for him. It was a release for both of them. "Thank you, Brad," she replied evenly. "I accept your apology." The air in the cafeteria shifted. A few students whispered to each other. Brad's former followers looked uncomfortable and shuffled away. But deep down, everyone sensed it. Today, the balance of power at Lincoln High truly changed. Change didn't happen overnight, though. Some white students still avoided Samantha. Their discomfort was evident whenever she passed. A few even muttered, "Let's see how long she lasts," under their breath. Some parents complained about the new girl disrupting the school and fretted about her bad influence. But to the students of color and to anyone who had ever been bullied, that moment was like the first light at the end of a long tunnel. Jessica Evans, one of the few other black girls at the school and the first to approach Samantha after her fight with Brad, quietly approached Samantha afterward, her eyes shining. "You did something no one else dared. Thank you, Samantha." From that day on, Samantha was no longer just the Detroit girl. She became a symbol of courage and the fight against injustice. Students who once cowered now stood taller, looking to her for inspiration. Some girls shyly asked to be friends. Others asked her to teach self-defense. Change at Lincoln High unfolded slowly but surely. The resigned silence gave way to hushed conversations, then to action. Though prejudice and discrimination still lingered, the halls now rang with voices of freedom and respect, as sparked by the unexpected strength of one small black girl who refused to bow to injustice. Since the day Brad Cooper was forced to apologize publicly, the atmosphere at Lincoln High has slowly begun to change, but that change still feels fragile, especially for students of color. Even though Brad's reign of power has crumbled, the echoes of prejudice and derision still creep through every classroom corner, every hallway, and most dangerously into the mouths of those just waiting for an opportunity to unleash their hatred on anyone who looks different. Samantha herself knows that even as she's become a symbol, the ghost of injustice is always waiting in the wings, just one misstep away from returning. One Monday afternoon, right after PE, Jessica Evans, the rare black girl at Lincoln High and the first to approach Samantha after her fight with Brad, quietly made her way over, flanked by three other girls: Angela Brooks, Tasha Lee, and Monique Carter. All four wore the same tense, anxious look. A familiar fear flickered behind their eyes. Before Samantha could ask what was wrong, Jessica's voice trembled as she struggled to stay calm. "Sam, can you talk to us for a minute? Not out here." They led Samantha to a secluded corner behind the school where few students passed. There, Jessica let down her brave facade and whispered, "We're in big trouble. Have you heard about Travis Miller's crew at Westside High?" Angela bit her lip. "They've been waiting for us after school almost every day. At first it was just taunts, calling us immigrants, colored puppets. But it's gotten worse. Yesterday, Travis grabbed Tasha's hair on purpose and laughed about it in front of everyone." Monique's eyes welled up. "The teacher can't do anything because they're just joking. And it all happens off school grounds. If we tell our parents, they'll probably forbid us from the group or from going out after school. But if we stay silent, who knows what they'll do next?" Samantha clenched her fists. That same mix of anger, fear, and shame was all too familiar. She glanced around at the small yard, once a hangout spot for Brad and his followers, now a refuge for powerless victims fleeing violence. "How many of them?" Samantha asked, her voice unnervingly calm. "5, Jessica said. "Big guys, all athletes. Some of them have been warned for fighting but never faced serious consequences. Their parents are powerful in West Side," Angela added, her lips pressed tight. "But it's not just size. They sling the worst racial slurs trying to make us feel worthless, dirty. They act like we're nothing but alien colors in this town." Samantha looked at each of them and saw two things: deep-seated fear and a flicker of hope shining back at her. She knew that if she stayed silent or told them to wait it out, the bullying would only continue and likely escalate, hitting the most vulnerable hardest. Gently resting a hand on Jessica's shoulder, she nodded deliberately. "I'll help you tomorrow. Go to the bus stop like normal after school. If anything happens, I'll be there, and I promise no one will, have to go through this again." The four girls exchanged surprised, teary glances. For them, that promise wasn't just protection. It was the first time in years they felt someone truly had their back. Yet that night, Samantha sat alone at her desk, quietly weighing the dangers ahead. She knew Travis Miller's crew weren't like Brad. They were reckless as well as cruel, willing to do anything to maintain their so-called white power in Maplewood. Samantha's resolve had been tested by fire before. But this time, it wasn't just her own safety on the line. If she succeeded, she would light a spark of hope for every oppressed student of color in Maplewood. But one misstep could cost her the fragile security she and her mother had fought to build. Somewhere else in town, Travis Miller and his friends, still drunk on their usual arrogance and cruelty, were talking about those black girls at Lincoln, as if they were new playthings, completely unaware that within 24 hours they would face a power and courage they had never imagined. That night, after promising Jessica and the others she'd help, Samantha lay awake, running through every possible scenario and risk. She'd faced bullies in Detroit, but Maplewood's prejudice was woven into the very fabric of the town, not just its school hallways, but every corner of the community. She knew that any mistake or hint of rush could put her mother and the girls depending on her in serious danger. The next afternoon, the air was cold, and the weak sun cast long shadows along the road leading to Lincoln High's bus stop. It was the usual meeting place where student groups waited for buses back to distant neighborhoods. Jessica, Angela, Tasha, and Monique huddled together, glancing around nervously. Samantha sat beside them on the wooden bench, a book in hand, but her eyes never left the approach. Her shoulders relaxed, but every sense was on high alert. Just as expected, Travis Miller's crew appeared, 5 tall white athletes in West Side High jerseys. Travis led the pack, his blonde hair cropped short, and a small hate symbol tattoo peeking at his neck. He wore a half smirk of contempt and threat. The others loitered behind him, crude grins on their faces. Their arrival drew a chill through the bus stop area, as if all sound was drained by the violence they carried.